The champagne glass shattered.
Marcus, what is this?
Open it. Everyone's waiting. Petition for dissolution of marriage.
I've spent years pretending to be happy.
That is not true, Marcus.
You controlled our home.
I decorated it because you asked me to.
The doors at the side of the ballroom opened. A woman in an emerald dress stepped through. Grace Sinclair. Elena recognized her instantly. "Meet the woman who reminds me what happiness feels like," Marcus said. Elena stared at the papers in her hand. 200 faces stared back, waiting for her to break. She didn't cry. She folded the divorce papers slowly, precisely, and slid them back into the envelope. Then she looked up and smiled. Not a broken smile, but something calm enough to make Marcus's confidence flicker for the first time all night.
What are you smiling about?
The order in which the truth comes out.
The ballroom doors opened again. 3 people walked in. A gray-haired attorney with a leather briefcase, a woman carrying a thick folder, and a younger man wheeling in a projector case. Marcus's smile disappeared. "Who are they?" he asked. Elena looked at him calmly. "The reason I never once interrupted your speech."
You wanted everyone to know the truth tonight. I think that's a wonderful idea, so let's tell them everything.
12 years earlier, Elena hadn't married a man who needed saving. She'd married a man who used to sit across from her at a kitchen table, barely big enough for 2 coffee cups, sketching out plans for a company his father was slowly losing to bad debt, and asking her what she thought. "You're smarter than everyone in that boardroom combined," he'd told her once, half joking, half not. "One day I'm going to hire you just to prove it." He never did. But for a while, he meant it. That version of Marcus was the one Elena kept looking for in the years that followed, through the promotions, the board seats, the slow hardening of his voice whenever her name came up in a meeting he hadn't been in. She told herself he was just tired, stressed, that the man who once asked for her opinion on everything hadn't disappeared, just gone quiet. Now, standing in front of 200 guests with divorce papers in her hand, she understood she'd been waiting 12 years for someone who was never coming back. The projector screen descended from the ceiling. "Ready when you are, Mrs. Whitfield," the technician said. "Wait," Marcus said, panic creeping under the anger now. "What are you doing?" Elena took the microphone. 12 years ago, she began, this company was 6 weeks from bankruptcy. Gasps. An elderly board member sat up straight. "Back then, my husband wasn't CEO. He was a junior manager, terrified of losing everything his father built." She looked at him. "Do you remember the emergency meeting everyone still talks about?" "Of course I do," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "You stood up afterward and told the entire board you'd found a way to save the company." "I did." "No," Elena said. "You didn't." Nervous laughter moved through the crowd. "My father passed away 6 months before that crisis," Elena continued. "He left me an inheritance. I'd planned to use it to open my own design studio." She paused. "Instead, I watched my husband's family losing everything, and I gave almost all of it away." The screen behind her lit up. A wire transfer. Millions of dollars. Recipient, Whitfield Textiles. The room erupted. "I asked to remain anonymous," Elena said. "I let everyone in this room believe my husband was the one who fixed it." An older board member stood, pointing at Thomas. "You told us the investor wanted to stay anonymous." Thomas nodded once. She did. "I believed a marriage meant building something together," Elena said, looking at Marcus now. Real hurt showing under the calm for just a second. "So, I let you be the hero." Marcus's jaw tightened. "This wasn't supposed to be about money. This was supposed to be about her." He stepped closer, needing to make it personal again, needing to be the one still standing at the center of the room. "So what?" he said. "You loaned the company some cash 12 years ago. That doesn't erase the last decade. You still made me feel like a guest in my own success." Marcus's words hung over the ballroom. "You still made me feel like a guest in my own success." Elena looked at him for several seconds. Then she asked quietly, "Did I?" Marcus opened his mouth, but she continued before he could answer. "Because I remember a very different man 12 years ago. A man who called me at 2 in the morning because he was terrified the company would collapse. A man who sat on our kitchen floor with spreadsheets spread around him and asked me to help him understand where his father had gone wrong." A few older executives exchanged glances. Marcus's jaw tightened. "That was 12 years ago." "Exactly. You've been keeping score all this time? No. Elena shook her head. I've been keeping records. That word changed the room. Marcus stared at her. What records? Elena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the attorney standing beside the projector. Mr. Bennett, you can wait. The attorney nodded. Marcus laughed nervously. Wait for what? For the right moment. You think you're in control because you've brought a lawyer and some documents to my father's ballroom? Elena's expression barely changed. No, I think I'm prepared. Grace stepped closer to Marcus and whispered, You said she didn't know. Elena heard her. She turned toward Grace. I didn't know what? Grace's face tightened. Nothing. Elena smiled faintly. That's what I thought. Marcus immediately stepped between them. Leave her out of this. Elena looked at him. Interesting. What? 5 minutes ago, you were proudly introducing her as the woman who makes you happy. Grace's confidence slipped. Now you're protecting her. Marcus lowered his voice. Don't turn this into something it isn't. You already did. Elena walked slowly toward the projector screen. The company records I'm about to show aren't about my marriage. She paused. They're about yours. Marcus frowned. What does that even mean? The company belongs to your father. Not for much longer. Thomas finally spoke. What did you just say? Marcus turned toward him. You heard me. Thomas's face hardened. You've been asking me to transfer controlling authority for years, and you've been refusing. Because you weren't ready. Marcus laughed bitterly. I wasn't ready? I built half the company. Elena quietly said. You presented half the company. Marcus turned toward her. Don't. Don't what? Don't stand there pretending you know everything. I don't. She glanced at the attorney. That's why I hired people who could find out. A murmur moved through the room. Marcus's face changed. For the first time, he wasn't angry. He was calculating. How long? Elena looked at him. How long what? How long have you been doing this? She let the silence stretch. Long enough. His eyes narrowed. Before tonight? Yes. Before the divorce? Yes. Before Grace? Elena looked at Grace. Much before Grace. Grace's lips parted. Marcus stared at Elena as though seeing his wife for the first time. You knew? I knew enough to start asking questions. What questions? Elena lifted the folder. The kind your accountants didn't answer. Marcus scoffed. My accountants? Your personal accountants. She opened the folder and removed a single page. 3 months ago, a payment of $87,000 was transferred from a Whitfield Textiles executive account. Marcus went still. Elena continued. The payment was described as a consulting expense. Marcus recovered quickly. It was. To whom? He didn't answer. Elena looked toward the screen. A name appeared. Grace Sinclair. The ballroom erupted. Grace's face drained of color. Marcus immediately stepped forward. That's not what it looks like. Someone laughed nervously. Elena turned toward Grace. You received $87,000 from my husband's company. Grace looked at Marcus. You told me it was a bonus. Marcus snapped. Grace, stop talking. She stared at him. A bonus? Not here. You said it was compensation for helping with the international accounts. Elena watched them quietly. Grace suddenly realized what was happening. You told me it was from your personal investment account. Marcus said nothing. Grace's eyes filled with disbelief. You lied to me too? Elena didn't interrupt. She wanted them to hear each other. Marcus finally said, It was complicated. No, Elena replied. It wasn't. She clicked the remote. The next document appeared. Another payment. Then another. Then another. The amounts were smaller, but the descriptions were nearly identical. Hotel expenses. Consulting. Client entertainment. Travel. Grace stared at the screen. I didn't know. Elena nodded. I believe you. Marcus glared at her. Stop pretending you're some kind of saint. I'm not. Then what are you? Elena looked around the room. Someone who got tired of being called controlling because she asked where the money was going. Thomas slowly stood. Marcus. His son's eyes shifted toward him. Don't. Thomas pointed toward the screen. Are those company accounts? Marcus hesitated. Yes. Did you authorize those payments? I signed off on legitimate expenses. That wasn't my question. Silence. Marcus looked away. Thomas's expression changed. He wasn't looking at his son anymore as a father defending a child. He was looking at him as a chairman, examining an executive. How much? Marcus swallowed. I don't know. Elena answered for him. $194,000 documented so far. A board member whispered. So far? Elena looked at him. Yes. That two-word answer hit harder than the number. Marcus stepped toward her. You've been digging through my accounts. Corporate accounts. You had no right. I had every right. You're my wife. Elena's eyes hardened. Exactly. She stepped closer. I was your wife when you asked me to save your family. I was your wife when I signed those guarantees. I was your wife when I sat beside you at board meetings and watched you repeat ideas I'd spent nights developing. And I was your wife when you started treating me like an embarrassment? Marcus's face tightened. Because you never knew when to stop. Elena stared at him. What did you say? You heard me. Say it again. Marcus hesitated. You always needed to be right. Elena nodded slowly. There it is. What? The truth. She turned toward the audience. He doesn't hate me because I controlled him. She looked back at Marcus. He hates me because I kept being right. Nobody laughed this time. Thomas lowered his eyes. Grace looked at Marcus differently now, and Elena knew the room had crossed a line. But she wasn't finished. Not even close. She turned to Mr. Bennett. Show them the next one. The attorney exchanged a glance with her. Are you certain? Elena nodded. Yes. The projector changed. A confidential document appeared. Marcus's face went completely still. Thomas leaned forward. What is that? Elena didn't answer. Marcus did. Where did you get that? The question came out almost as a whisper. Elena looked directly at him. Now we're getting to the reason I needed 93 days. The confidential document on the screen was a proposed acquisition agreement. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Thomas whispered, That's not supposed to be outside the executive office. Elena looked at him. It wasn't. Marcus stared at the screen. Turn that off. Elena didn't move. Why? Because that's confidential. I know. Then turn it off. Elena's voice remained calm. Why are you afraid of something that isn't yours? Marcus's face tightened. It belongs to the company. Exactly. She turned toward the board. 3 months ago, this proposal was prepared for a private acquisition. Only 6 people had access to it. One of the directors frowned. 6? Yes. Thomas looked at his son. Who? Elena answered. Yourself, Marcus. 2 members of the legal department, the chief financial officer, and me. And, Marcus immediately said, So? So the competing company received a copy of it 4 days before our board was supposed to review it. A wave of whispers moved through the ballroom. Thomas's face hardened. How? Elena looked at the attorney. Mr. Bennett? The attorney stepped forward. Our forensic review identified the source of the leak. Marcus's voice rose. This is ridiculous. The attorney didn't react. The document was accessed using Mr. Whitfield's executive credentials. Marcus laughed. Credentials can be stolen. Yes. The attorney clicked his remote. Another page appeared, which is why we didn't stop there. A list of timestamps appeared. Marcus's laughter disappeared. The document was downloaded from Mr. Whitfield's office computer at 11:43 p.m. on June 17. Marcus stared at the screen. Anyone could have been in my office. Your security log says otherwise, the attorney replied. The room became silent. At 11:41 p.m., Mr. Whitfield entered his office. Another timestamp appeared. At 11:43, the document was downloaded. Another. At 11:47, the document was attached to an email. Thomas looked at his son. Who was the recipient? Elena answered. A competing corporation. Marcus's expression changed. That's not proof. No, Elena said. The email itself is proof. The next image appeared. Sender, Marcus Whitfield. Recipient, Adrian Vale, CEO of Meridian Global. The room erupted. Marcus took a step backward. No. Grace stared at him. You emailed them? Marcus turned toward her. Don't. You said you were negotiating with them. I was. You never said you were selling them company information. I wasn't, Elena interrupted. You were. Marcus looked at her with fury. You've been waiting for this. No. She paused. I've been waiting for you to tell the truth. Thomas stepped toward his son. Did you send that email? Marcus said nothing. Marcus. His son finally looked at him. I needed the deal. Thomas's face fell. What deal? Marcus rubbed his forehead. They offered me a position. The ballroom went completely still. Thomas stared at him. You were negotiating with a competitor? Marcus's voice became defensive. They valued what I could bring. What you could bring? Marcus looked around the room. I built this company. Elena quietly said. You wanted to sell access to it. That's not what happened. Then explain it. Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came. Grace stepped away from him. You told me you were going to take over another division. Marcus looked at her. I was. You said your father was going to retire. He was. You said you'd finally have control. Marcus didn't answer. Grace's eyes filled with tears. You were planning to leave the company? Marcus snapped. I was planning to make my own future. Elena watched him. And what did you plan to do with mine? Marcus looked at her. Yours? The company. It was never yours. The words landed harder than anything he'd said before. Elena's expression changed. Not anger. Something quieter. That's what you've always believed. Marcus realized too late what he'd admitted. Thomas closed his eyes. Marcus. His son turned toward him. What? You just said the company was never hers. It isn't. Thomas looked toward Elena. Tell him. Elena shook her head. No. He can keep believing that for another minute. Marcus frowned. What does that mean? She reached for another folder. I showed everyone the money. She placed the folder on the table. I showed them the work. Another folder. I showed them the records. She looked at Marcus. But I haven't shown them the ownership documents. His face went pale. What ownership documents? Elena didn't answer immediately. A board member stood. Elena, what are you saying? She looked toward him. I'm saying that 12 years ago, when I invested my inheritance into Whitfield Textiles, I didn't simply transfer money. Marcus stared at her. I negotiated. Thomas's eyes widened. You never told me. I didn't want you to know. Why? Because I wanted the company to survive without becoming a family argument. She opened the folder. I accepted preferred shares. The board member's mouth fell open. Another director stood. Preferred shares? Elena nodded. With voting rights. Marcus stared at her. How many? Elena looked directly into his eyes. Enough. Thomas slowly sat down. Marcus shook his head. No. Elena continued. The original agreement gave me a minority position. Marcus exhaled. Exactly. But the agreement also included provisions protecting my investment if the company became insolvent, if controlling shareholders attempted to transfer company assets improperly, or if confidential corporate information was deliberately provided to a competitor. The room became silent. Marcus looked toward the attorney. You knew about this? Mr. Bennett nodded. I reviewed the original agreement. Marcus looked back at Elena. You've been planning this. No. She corrected him. You've been giving me reasons to use it. Grace whispered. Marcus. He ignored her. You never told me. You never asked. I was your husband. And I was your partner. Elena's voice cracked for the first time. But somewhere along the way, you decided I was only your wife. Marcus stared at her. You let me believe I owned this company. You believed whatever made you feel powerful. The board chairman looked toward the attorney. What is her current voting position? The attorney opened the document. Following the trigger provisions in the agreement, Mrs. Reyes currently controls enough protected voting shares to block any unauthorized transfer of controlling assets. A director whispered, My God. Marcus shook his head. This is a setup. Elena looked at him. No. She reached for the remote. This is the part you never bothered to read. The screen changed again. A second agreement appeared. This time, Marcus's signature was visible. He stared at it. What is that? Elena said quietly. Your succession agreement. His face drained. You signed it 3 years ago. Marcus looked toward his father. Why didn't you tell me? Thomas's voice was barely audible. Because you didn't read it, Elena continued. You signed away certain executive protections if you were found to have deliberately endangered the company. Marcus stared at the screen. No. The attorney stepped forward. There is more. Elena looked at him. Go ahead. He placed another document on the table. This was submitted to the board 72 hours ago. Marcus's eyes widened. Submitted for what? The chairman picked it up. He read the first paragraph. Then his expression changed. Elena. She nodded. Read it. The chairman looked toward Marcus. This is a formal motion for an emergency board review of the CEO's conduct. Marcus laughed nervously. You can't remove me. The chairman didn't answer. Marcus looked around the room. Nobody is removing me. Thomas slowly stood. Marcus. His son turned. Don't. Thomas's eyes were wet. You should have stopped talking a long time ago. Marcus stared at his father. What are you saying? Thomas looked toward the chairman. Call the vote. The ballroom erupted. Marcus's face went completely white. Elena remained still. For 93 days, she had waited for this moment. But she knew something Marcus didn't. The board vote wasn't the final revelation. It was only the beginning of the consequence. The chairman looked around the ballroom. All those in favor of an immediate suspension of Marcus Whitfield's executive authority pending the completion of the investigation? Marcus stared at the board members. Don't. Nobody moved. Then one director raised his hand. I have. Another followed. E. Then another. E. Marcus's breathing became shallow. You're making a mistake. No one answered. Thomas remained standing beside his chair, his face pale. Marcus turned toward him. Dad. Thomas looked at his son. I can't stop this. You can. No. You own the company. Thomas shook his head. I own shares. I don't own the people sitting at this table. Marcus's voice cracked. You're choosing her. Thomas stared at him for several seconds. No. Marcus looked relieved for half a second. Then Thomas continued. I'm choosing the company you were supposed to protect. The chairman counted the votes. Unanimous. The words seemed to knock the air out of Marcus. Effective immediately, Marcus Whitfield is suspended from all executive duties pending a full forensic investigation. Marcus laughed once. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. You can't do this. The chairman's expression remained firm. It has already been done. Marcus turned toward Elena. You planned this. Elena shook her head. I prepared for it. You knew this was coming. I knew you were becoming dangerous. You could have warned me. I did. He frowned. When? Elena's voice softened. Every time I asked you where the money was going. Marcus looked away. Every time I asked why confidential documents were leaving your office. His jaw tightened. Every time I asked why you were spending company money on someone who wasn't an employee. Grace lowered her head. And every time I asked you whether you still respected me. Marcus looked back at her. You never trusted me. I trusted the man you used to be. That sentence hurt him more than the vote. Grace slowly stepped away from Marcus. He noticed. Grace. She didn't answer. Don't do this. She looked at him. Do what? Leave. Her eyes filled with tears. You told me everything you had belonged to you. Marcus said nothing. You told me your father was going to retire and that you were going to take control. I was. No. Grace shook her head. You were pretending. Marcus reached for her hand. Grace, listen to me. She pulled away. I should have listened to her. Elena looked at Grace. I never wanted you destroyed. Grace swallowed. I know. I wanted the truth. Grace nodded slowly. You got it. She turned toward the ballroom doors. Marcus watched her walk away. Grace. She stopped. He waited for her to turn around. She didn't. I loved you, he said. Grace's voice broke. I loved the man you pretended to be. Then she walked out. The doors closed behind her. Marcus stood alone. For the first time that evening, nobody was standing beside him. The chairman gathered the documents. The investigation will begin tomorrow morning. Marcus laughed bitterly. Tomorrow? Elena looked at him. You've had 93 days. He stared at her. What does that mean? It means you had 93 days to tell the truth. And if I had, maybe tonight would have been different. Marcus looked at the projector. The evidence was still there. The transfers, the emails, the company records, the ownership agreements. Everything he had spent years pretending didn't exist. He looked at his father. Dad, please. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. I wanted you to become the man I thought you could be. I can fix this. You should have fixed yourself before you endangered everyone else. Marcus shook his head. I built this company. Thomas answered quietly. No. You inherited the opportunity to build it. He looked toward Elena. She protected it. Then toward the employees standing around the ballroom. They worked for it. His voice hardened. And you nearly destroyed it. Marcus lowered his head. For the first time, he had nothing left to argue. The chairman turned toward Elena. Mrs. Reyes, there is one final matter. She looked up. What matter? The board has reviewed the original investment agreements. Marcus slowly lifted his head. The chairman continued. Given your protected voting position, your 12 years of strategic involvement, and the findings of this investigation, the board would like to appoint you interim chief executive officer. Silence. Elena stared at him. No. Several directors exchanged surprised looks. The chairman frowned. No? She shook her head. Not because I don't appreciate the confidence. She looked around the ballroom. I just don't want this position because my husband lost it. Marcus looked at her. Then why? Elena took a breath. Because I believe this company can become something better than what it has been. The chairman smiled. Then accept it for that reason. Thomas stepped toward her. You've been doing the job for years. Elena looked at him. Quietly. Too quietly. A small smile appeared on her face. Maybe. The chairman extended his hand. Mrs. Reyes? Elena looked at Marcus one final time. Then she looked at the employees. I'll accept. Applause erupted across the ballroom. Not the polite applause Marcus had received when he entered. Not applause because people were expected to clap. This was different. People stood. Employees cried. Several directors applauded above their heads. Elena remained still for a moment, overwhelmed by the sound. Then Thomas approached her. I'm sorry. She shook her head. Please don't apologize for his choices. I should have seen it sooner. You saw it. Thomas looked at her. You just didn't know how bad it was. He nodded. I knew you saved us. Elena smiled faintly. I didn't save you. What? I saved the company. She looked toward the employees. They're the ones who kept it alive afterward. One young employee stepped forward. Mrs. Reyes? Elena turned. The young woman wiped tears from her face. I almost resigned last year. Why didn't you? You told me to stay. Elena smiled. I remember. You said things would get better. The employee laughed through her tears. They did. Soon another employee approached. Then another. People began telling Elena stories she barely remembered. A promotion she had recommended. A family emergency she had quietly helped with. A bonus she had fought for. A junior employee she had encouraged to apply for a position. Marcus watched from across the room. He finally understood. Elena hadn't built her influence by demanding it. She had built it by showing up for people when nobody was watching. And that was the one thing he could never fake. Security eventually approached him. Mr. Whitfield. Marcus looked at them. Your executive access has been suspended. He slowly removed his gold identification badge. For 12 years, that badge had opened every door in the building. Tonight, it opened nothing. He placed it in the guard's hand. Then he looked toward Elena. She wasn't smiling at him. She wasn't celebrating his humiliation. She simply watched him. Marcus walked toward her. He stopped several feet away. I don't expect you to forgive me. Elena nodded. Good. He swallowed. I am sorry. I believe you. His eyes lifted. But being sorry doesn't rebuild 12 years. He nodded. I know. He turned to leave. Marcus. He stopped. Elena looked at him. You should tell the truth during the investigation. He gave a tired smile. Even now you're trying to save me. No. She shook her head. I'm trying to save the people who would suffer if you kept lying. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Goodbye, Elena. Goodbye. He walked through the ballroom doors. Outside, rain had begun falling against the hotel windows. Inside, Elena stood beneath the lights while employees gathered around her. The birthday cake was still untouched. The orchestra had stopped playing hours ago. But Elena looked toward the musicians. Could you play something? The conductor smiled. Of course. And music slowly filled the ballroom again. Thomas approached her. This wasn't the birthday you expected. Elena smiled. No. She looked toward the enormous screen still displaying the final evidence. But maybe it was the birthday I needed. 6 months later, Whitfield Textiles recorded its strongest quarter in company history. The company restored employee bonuses. A scholarship fund was created for employees' children. The internal whistleblower program was expanded. And Elena refused every interview that tried to make the story about her revenge. Whenever reporters asked how she felt about Marcus's downfall, she gave the same answer. I didn't build my life to watch someone else lose theirs. 1 year later, Thomas officially retired. At his retirement ceremony, he stood before hundreds of employees. There is one thing I regret, he said. The room became silent. I waited too long to publicly recognize the person who helped save this company. He turned toward Elena. She never asked for praise. The applause began before he finished. Elena stood. Thomas continued. Leadership isn't inherited. He smiled. It's earned. The entire room rose. Elena looked around at the people standing for her. For years, she had believed she needed Marcus to recognize her value. She finally understood she never had. That night, back in her office, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside was the divorce petition Marcus had handed her on her birthday. She read the first page once. Then she folded it carefully. She didn't tear it. She didn't burn it. She simply placed it back inside the drawer, Some chapters didn't need revenge. They only needed an ending. Elena closed the drawer and looked through the glass wall at the employees still working late. She smiled. 12 years earlier, she had invested everything she had to save a company. She thought she was saving her husband's family. She hadn't realized she was also building the life she would eventually choose for herself. And that was the truth Marcus never understood. He thought he had brought divorce papers into that ballroom to take something away from her. Instead, he had given her the one thing she had been too loyal to take for herself: freedom. If Elena's story stayed with you, tell me in the comments. Would you have exposed Marcus publicly like Elena did, or would you have handled everything privately? And if you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Afro-Korean Folktales, and turn on notifications for the next story. Because sometimes the person being humiliated isn't the person who loses. Sometimes they're the person who finally stops losing themselves.